Thousands of Afghan people are continuing their desperate attempt to flee Kabul. Chaotic scenes at the airport, pictures coming through to us of difficult scenes, and a report in the last hour that 12 people have been killed trying to get away since Sunday, that is. Now, the Prime Minister has pledged to settle 20,000 refugees from Afghanistan in the UK over the next few years.
But some have argued that that is simply not enough. People like the MP David Davis, who said the UK should accept north of 50,000. So, should we increase or indeed have no limit on Afghan refugees, or should the numbers indeed be capped? We are joined by Stephen Wolfe from the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity and a former UKIP MEP. He says there must be a limit. We're also joined by Dawn O'Porter from the charity Choose Love, which provides humanitarian aid to refugees. And Dawn says we should help as many people as we can. Good morning and welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Let me just start, Stephen, by asking you this. I read a number this morning when I was researching the story, which says that at least 400,000 Afghans have been forced from their homes this year. So a lot of them have been displaced within their own country. But 400,000 humans have left their own homes in that single country. And now we've pulled out, and now everything's collapsed, and the Taliban have returned. Don't we have a responsibility as humans to those humans whose country we have disrupted? Don't we have a clear moral responsibility to take more than... By the way, when we say 20,000, it's 5,000 this year. Surely, Stephen, there's an argument that says we take more than 5,000 this year.
There's an argument that we have responsibilities under our duties under the UN Convention to look after those people who are refugees and genuine asylum seekers. That doesn't matter whether it's from Afghanistan or across the globe, and we already do that in this country. We'll accept 30,000 applicants for asylum seekers this year and 40,000 last year. So it's not that this country doesn't have a responsibility or undertake that. The more important question, Richard, is how many should we be able to take?
And what's the answer?
If we can, sorry.
What is the answer?
And let's have a look at the genuine numbers that will come through. During the Syrian crisis, the population of Syria was 22 million people with a very strong middle class. 5 million people left, and as we know, 1.7 million went to Germany. Afghanistan now is totally different to the previous Taliban regime. It has a population of 39 million. It has nearly 15% of 4.5 million who are middle class. And if we look at the numbers compared to Syria, then we will have a range of between 1.5 million to 3 million people leaving within the next few months.
What's the middle class thing got to do with it? Sorry.
I think you're implying, are you, that they have more of a structure to handle the situation? Steve, come back to that middle class point in a moment. I mean, you've cited UN regulations and rules. Some would argue, maybe Dawn will in a moment, that actually beyond rules and regulations, there's a moral responsibility here. So many questions have been asked about how our withdrawal has been handled, and they will continue being questioned. There's been testimony from people who've lost their lives from Britain in trying to make Afghan work and for our own purposes to secure and reduce the risk of terrorism coming out of that area. And we have a moral duty. So
in an emergency as well.
A moral duty and an urgency. And this isn't a moment, you might have a different view, and I'm sure you'll give it to me, that this isn't a moment where it's simply about regulations.
No, one accepts that. And my point here is that we shouldn't not say, let's not take anybody. That wasn't my point from the very beginning. The very point is that, of course, there will be some people who will be seen as collaborators in Afghanistan now for assisting anybody of the West, ranging from governments to non-government organizations. That's what happens when one country invades another. This is the consequences. And for foreign policy and moral purposes, we're going to have to consider taking people in. This is why the government has decided it's going to take around 20,000. And you'll see other countries doing exactly the same. But again, one has to accept the question here. This is an emergency, but we have emergencies in Haiti at the moment. We have issues in Iraq and Iran.
Our responsibility to Afghanistan is different to our responsibility to Haiti. Can I just say, just want to come to Dawn. Let's hear from Dawn. I don't know if you can see the TV, Dawn, this morning. We were just showing an image that we've referred to a few times today of a a young boy with a blanket. There it is. It's incredibly...
Yeah, and people passing their babies through a crowd.
Yeah.
This is not about, we can't compare this to the refugee crisis around the world. This is quite an isolated case. This is about morality and loyalty that we have as a country to people who have fought shoulder to shoulder with our troops for the last 2 decades. They stepped up for us and now we're just saying, sorry, but we're not here for you when you need us. And it's not a numbers game. We're just so confused about where this random number of 20,000 came from. It just doesn't represent the scale of the problem at all. And I don't know how it looks for Britain's attitude towards democracy, Britain's attitude towards women's empowerment. It's just turning our backs. It's plain and simple. And this whole idea of 5 years, like, why does anyone think we have the luxury of 5 years? People are starting to disappear now. Women are disappearing, activists are disappearing, people from the LGBTQ community are disappearing. They're not safe there, and we have to get them out. And we're talking immediately. They are in imminent, grave danger. This isn't something that we can like luxuriously say we're going to get 20,000 people out over 5 years. 5 years, it's 20,000 in 5 years is just this bizarre random number plucked out of nowhere that just doesn't represent the scale of the problem at all.
I think many people would see what you're saying. As soon as we said we were doing this debate, though, we were surged by people with a different view, and I just want to put those points to you. One of them is that we have people here that we're trying to home and house and look after, some of those ex-veterans, and it's all very well having the desire to save those in imminent danger, as you put it, but what about the reality of where they're going to live and how they're going to be housed? I mean, you work for a charity. I'm sure you talk to people. Is there an answer to that would satisfy people?
The answer to that is that everyone on this world deserves the right to have basic human rights. And I think, of course, we want everyone here taken care of. But the fact is that these people are fleeing war. These people are hanging off planes, putting their tiny children on boats, like leaving situations that are so unfathomable, so frightening and so dangerous that they're putting their lives at risk just to try and get away from that. This isn't a case of us being like, oh, everyone come here because our country doesn't matter. That's not what we're saying. We're like, we need to normalise just helping people globally, wherever anybody is. And everyone, people here who aren't being taken care of, people over there who are fleeing war, everyone just deserves basic human rights and deserves not to wake up every morning in fear of their lives.
I mean, people are entitled to whatever opinion they want, but you can sort of sit here and look at all the news stories today and see thousands of people rallying around saving an alpaca, and then see a load of people say, and email in and say, we shouldn't let any refugees. There are people saying that we shouldn't let any refugees in from Afghanistan, and they're looking at these same images. Stephen, this idea that it should be 20,000 over 5 years that Dawn was talking about there, do you find that weird? That we've come up with a very round number, 5,000 a year. There's an emergency situation. We don't know how bad it's going to get. It's changing every few minutes. We found out that 12 people have been shot since Sunday. It's changing all the time. Social media is showing images now of the Taliban being brutal. That's coming to us. We're seeing that. Like, do you find that idea weird, that it's set at 5,000 a year and hopefully some of those women and children maybe will get you in 2024? Like, do you find that strange?
Not necessarily, because going back to your previous question about those people who assisted the British government in the most dangerous times against the Taliban and the other terrorists. So I suspect that the number that they've come up with relates to translators, those in the military, those in the armed forces, those in the security services, those in the civil services or the embassies that were helping the British government. And that's where the initial assessment comes through.
Do you
and that's
accept
what other
then that if that is the case, and that's the initial settlement, there will be tens of thousands, fearfully possibly more, that will lose their lives that are outside of that bracket?
Yes.
Because it's not just the interpreters, is it? It's not just those who work directly for government officials. It will be women that have taken on roles in banks. Already we've seen those be turfed out and told, go home, your job will be replaced by men. They that will feel exposed and targeted. It's people who've worked in terms of trying to raise awareness in reporting and anybody that's been seen to work with the previous government and the previous regime.
Okay,
they are in danger.
Can I add a point to your point, which is, if we accept that that is a possible hypothesis or a possible outcome, that tens of thousands of people will die, are we honestly saying, Stephen, that in all of the United Kingdom, and you've got organisations like Choose Love that are willing to help people, are you honestly saying we haven't got room for them in all of the UK? We haven't got room for them?
Well, what I will say, first of all, Richard, going back to your point, you asked the question, why did I mention the middle class? The point is that those who've worked and benefited from the British government, the US and others in there, is the region of around 4.57 million people currently in Afghanistan who didn't have that level of jobs, wealth, or even understanding, or the ability now to fund the people traffickers.
Do the Taliban distinguish between middle-class women and non-middle-class women?
No, but my point between you, Richard, is that those people who will get over here will not be the poor. They will not be the villagers in Kandahar.
Sorry, I just want to just put a specific end to my question, Stephen, which was, we know that more people are going to be heard. Can you live with that, is what I was going to say, because you seem to be taking a very practical view of it. And you're doing it knowing that more people are going to die than is included in those numbers.
And it's about being a woman, it's not about being middle class.
Can you personally live with that, and how? I'm just interested.
Well, Richard, with respect, that won't be the case. It won't be just every woman in Afghanistan, the poor or the rich. It would be those who would tend to be rich. They're the ones who tend to escape most. And that's historically what's happened in all the crises we've seen since the 1950s. And first and foremost, there are 254,000 people who are currently sitting in accommodation waiting for homes in the UK, in bedsits and housing. We have 110,000 asylum seekers sitting in hotels. We have 2 million people who are pensioners in poverty in the UK alone. And if we are to take the numbers that is suggested, and our numbers are pointing towards 1.5 million people would be likely to come to the West in the next few months, you've got to be prepared to build the houses, extend the schools, and as Germany found, have 4 billion a year.
Dawn, you heard that. Let's go back to Dawn. Dawn, what do you want to say to that?
Right, so look, so we're not saying that the entire responsibility of all those people falls on Britain. This has to be a global effort. This has to be other countries coming together saying, you know, we will take. So let's just get out the idea that, you know, people who are in support of getting people out of Afghanistan are saying, everybody come here. We understand that there has to be, you know, a conversation going on with other places about who's going to take who. The fact is, I see this in my head in the history books, you know, in hundreds of years' time, where people are reading it going, wait, so they knew that women were getting killed. They knew that activists, journalists, LGBTQ community was getting killed, and they just like let that happen and said, no, you can't come in. And I just want to put people in the position of, we don't know what our future is. We don't know what's going to happen in the world. If you'd have said to us 5 years ago there was going to be a global pandemic that was going to shut the world down and we wouldn't be allowed out, no, everyone would have said, that's never going to happen to us. We don't know what our future holds. What if it was us and our country became unsafe and we needed to go somewhere else? And you had your baby in your arms and you got on a boat or you hung off a plane or you did whatever you needed to do to get to safety, and wherever you got to just said, no, we are not interested, we can't help you, we're not doing it. Just put yourself in that position.
Yeah.
And we always need to, it's not a case of everyone just come here, it's a case of saving lives.
Dawn, you make a very passionate case. And I have to say, Stephen, as well, there are many people that agree with you that share concerns about the numbers.
There are people emailing us.
Very interesting to talk to both of you.
You are representing a view that is out there in Great Britain, and you know we need to hear all sides of the argument, and that's what we're here for. To me, it's a bit like watching The Handmaid's Tale, except in this version of it, you have a chance to get them out of it. That's how it feels to me, to some degree.
It's frightening. It's frightening.